Wow, way better role. Way better.
Like, love it. I'm like, ready?
Okay. This is Haley. And this is Bailey. And you're listening to Text Me When You Land.
Hey, Bailey, what's new?
No, I'm kind of sleepy now that we.
I'm tired. That's what's new. That's not new.
New. I don't know. I feel like I feel like every time you ask me what's new, I'm like, I've been so busy. Why do I feel like I'm always busy? But
You're always busy, but I do know what's new with you. You posted it on your story. You went and got cupping. How was that?
Oh, yeah, I did get cupping. It was good. It was good. It was good. What is wrong with me? I have a sleeve. Wake me up.
You're like, oh, yeah, I did do that. I'm so glad I could tell you what your new news is.
I have a little mark.
So what is he doing it for? I was wondering about that. You get like a giant hickey on your neck?
Yeah, you can see it. It's not as bruised as some get, but it's definitely there. And then I'd done acupuncture right before, so there was like a needle there, and then he put cupping, and it was like bleeding after, and I was like, I didn't understand, and then I realized it was acupuncture. But I was having headaches. I told him, I think just like for my time of the month and that stuff, and I think I've just been wearing too many ponytails, which sounds silly, but I really should not do that as much. But I like my head sensitive. So that helps a lot, which is
I
nice.
remember you telling me about your head being sensitive when we were skiing. You said like wearing your helmet, your goggles,
Oh,
stuff like
yeah.
that.
I'm so
That's
sensitive.
interesting.
Like I wore sunglasses the other day all day, and like just from like the tiny bit of pressure, I couldn't do it. Like I literally kept having to take them off. But then it's like it's bright. It's so
Jeez.
annoying. It's like my headaches are so
That
much better
sucks.
from acupuncture, but if I'm not, like I haven't been in a while, so it's like I had to go and like get back on top of it, get back in the routine because we've been traveling. Staying on top of my routine when we're traveling isn't always easy.
Yeah, for sure.
What's new with you?
Oh yeah, I guess I should probably share my
I
news. So Bryce and I are going to be taking like a mini vacation here soon, and we booked our Airbnb at a place I grew up going to as a kid. It was actually my mom's aunt, but they now rent the house out on Airbnb because my mom's aunt is now not here. And so we rented it. I was like, this is gonna be so fun. It's renovated. It looks so cute. It's on the water. It was like, oh, perfect. And then I got super excited because it was a good deal because it was like before like peak season. And then we read the reviews after we booked it, and it was like black mold in the fridge, smells like fraternity house, super dirty, construction next door, hence the discounted rates. And I was like, oh, no. So
That's
we canceled
so sad.
it.
Oh man.
I know. I'm
That's a
so
bummer.
sad. It's like my childhood place. And I was talking to my mom about it, and she's like, yeah, there was always mold in that shower there. You didn't know what it was though because you're a kid. Like, and there were bugs everywhere. And I'm like, man,
You're
to be
like,
a kid again, I really
and
just
not overthink all that.
Yeah, you just a bug, cool. Like I saw a
Yeah.
bee the other day and I freaking freaked out because I'm allergic, but still, I'm like, I just wish I wasn't scared of these things.
I get that. I feel like being a kid is so nice.
I know. The lack of not knowing.
We were thinking about topics to talk about today, and we were talking about friendships and how scary friendship fights can be, and arguments, and
It's so
confrontation,
uncomfy.
and how it is dealt with so differently in each friendship, and how it can bring up so much stress. And it doesn't even just have to be a friendship, it can be like your significant other, it can be your parents, it can be whatever it is,
Your
like
boss.
I feel like it can bring up so many emotions, and it can affect you in so many ways you don't even realize.
It's so true. I was thinking the other day because Bryce was like, "Are you and Bailey okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, we are. She's just really busy, and I haven't had a lot of things to update her on. So I'm just kind of like, we're good." But it's funny how like when two friends are in constant communication and then something stops or like things change or the whatever life like goes on, it's like, is something wrong? What's going on? Are you guys okay? And I'm like, yeah, we're good. Like, I think we're good. And then he's like, okay, just making sure. I was like, yeah, we're good. And then you were asking me the other day, and you're like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm good. I think I'm just kind of in a funk, but I don't have anything wrong. But then we're just talking about friendships, and like I see these people get into like heated discussions, and like and friendships fall out and all these things. I'm just really glad that we have such a great way of communicating when things are off, you know?
For sure. I think communication is huge because I think no matter what friendship you have, and I think this is like very misunderstood, that there are fights. You're going to have things that you don't agree on. You're going to go through things. But I think being able to communicate is huge. And I feel like, yeah, like we were just talking, I was like, yeah, we've had our things. And you're like, what? And you're like, I blocked that out because it's scary, like, and it is
Yes.
like talking about it is scary. And I feel like even us talking about it on a podcast, I mean, like, yeah, we have our things. It's scary to admit, not that it's like there's anything wrong with it, but not a lot of people talk about how it should be normal to communicate about those things versus like holding it in. And then you have these big falling out and you see all these people that have these big falling outs. And then it's harder to come back from that. And really, like, I've had things where it's like these big things have happened in friendships and maybe like years down the road it can come back into like picture and you like work on it, but a lot of times when you have those giant fallouts, like it really affects a friendship, and I think that comes from lack of communication and addressing the things that might be bugging you and being upfront with, hey, I'm having a hard time. Like, this is bugging me, and just talking about it versus being like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, people pleasing and feeling like it's going to be harder to talk about it because no, it's going to be easier in the big picture to deal with it than to shove it down.
I totally agree. And I think too with certain relationships and dynamics, you really have to understand if people are emotionally capable of having those conversations because like leaving names out, but there was a person I was talking with and they had said something really hurtful to me. And I know that they weren't intending to, like, be so hurtful, but it really was the way it came across. But I knew that if I had brought it up or said something, it would have just been turned on me and it would not have gone a good way. So I just had to kind of ignore it and move past it. And it's really hard because I just know that they didn't have the emotional maturity to be able to have those kinds of discussions. And it really puts an impact on the friendships and the relationships and whatever dynamic it is. It makes it hard to be more vulnerable with those types of people.
For sure, not everybody in a friendship or in a relationship or whatever it is has that ability to talk, and I think that can actually be really hard if you're somebody that likes to communicate. Like, I'm such a communicator, like, I don't like things just dangling there and like knowing something's like going on, like that drives me crazy. Like, I'd rather just be like, hey, this is bugging me, because I think I'm a person that if like it's bugging me, and I shove it down, like it'll come out in the ways that I don't want it to come out. And I would rather just be like, hey, yeah, I am having a hard time, but I'm also a person who really doesn't like confrontation and I don't want to hurt somebody. So it's like I've had to learn how to like share what's bothering me without also making someone defensive. Like that, I mean, that was a lot in one thing, but like
That
those are
it's
huge. Like,
so hard to address something without getting someone defensive. Yeah, you nailed
and
that.
oh my god, my brain's running at like a million miles an hour. But like
There's a lot.
also, there's so much. But like also being able to have relationships where like you can be like, you can accept you could probably be in the wrong, because most of the time it's 50-50. I mean, every relationship is 50-50. Maybe sometimes it's, like off balance, but still like being able to admit when you're wrong, but also having someone that is able to admit when they're wrong. Like when you address something and they're like, no, 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 it makes it hard to communicate. You don't want to go and communicate with them, and you don't want to address these things if
No,
they're
you
not
wanna shut
able to
down.
discuss. Yeah. Wow,
It's
that was like a million thoughts.
no, it's so true. And the thing is too, it's like how do you have those kind of confrontations, conversations with those people and still have a relationship if they're not able to have that, you know? It's like I don't know, for those friendships out there, how do you have a relationship with those people or a friendship when they aren't able to have those emotionally mature conversations because of lack of perspective they have?
I think that's so hard. What do you think? I feel like that's so hard because I feel
Especially
like
when it's
those
family.
yeah, that's super hard too. I feel like I just end up being
I think you have to have
not
boundaries
as
at that
open,
point.
yeah, a bit. I feel like it's a boundary, and
It's a
I
boundary.
end up pulling back more and not sharing as much so that I
Mhm.
don't have that boundary crossed, because I think when somebody's really close and knows a lot of what's going on, it's easier for that boundary to be overstepped. And that's hard because it's not always like you want to do that with
It's
especially family.
it's true, and, like, I was thinking because these people have the lack of ability of being able to receive I don't like say criticism, but, like, awareness of something they did wrong. And whether if it's brought up in a healthy way or not, it still doesn't ever get it's not a constructive conversation because they always get put on the defense or their body's just naturally in a state of fight or flight. And so they're either like, I'm not doing this, I'm out. Like, nope, nope, sorry, can't do it. Or they just come at it, arms swinging, and they just are ready to go. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, I'm not
Yeah,
that
I
way.
if that happens, I feel like I shut down, and that's like because then I feel like I don't, if someone comes at it like full force, like, throwing all these things, I feel like I shut down and then I'm not able to communicate how I'd want to, and it all comes off wrong, and then the conversation wasn't productive because you're, like, panicking, and that's something I said earlier was, like, you don't wanna make someone defensive when you go into a conversation, and I think that's hard, but choosing your words is very important. Like, make sure you aren't making someone, like, defensive when you are going into those hard conversations because it's easy when you're hurt to make somebody like, for it to come out wrong and make someone defensive, but taking the time to really, like, think about it before going into those hard conversations, I think is important.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking the other day, I was like, "Hmm, I wonder what that person's up to." I think the last time I talked to them was in high school, and, like, people say, "Oh, I'm not the same person anymore, like, who am I? I've changed," and but, like, our last interaction with some people was, like, maybe not a good experience, and so that's, like, the last taste and or, like, perception they have of you, which can be really hard, but I think that I've realized you're not gonna be a favorite for everyone. And once you kind of come to that realization that you or no, my sister worded it very well. You're going to be the villain in someone else's story and you need to be okay with that. And I'm like, ooh, that is a hard pill to swallow for some people. Some people are such people pleasers or cannot handle the thought of looking bad to other people, but it's like you have to come to grips that sometimes these relationships and these people that you have, the fallouts, you're going to be a villain in someone else's story and you have to be okay with that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're never going to make everybody happy. And I think you learn that. I mean, especially in what we do and sharing our life on social media and what we share and all these things, and everybody has comments. You learn you're not ever going to make everybody happy. You're just not. You can try and you can literally just become miserable because all you're doing is trying to people please and make everybody else happy. Or you can focus on yourself and making the people that are important to, yes, happy, but also having those boundaries and being able to actually hold those boundaries and not just trying to make everybody like you because this is never going to happen. You're never going to fit in everybody's box of how they think you should be because a lot of people think you should be a certain way and then if you like stray from that, like you're the villain or you're this or that, and I think that's something that's hard to always wrap your head around.
So, have you ever gotten into a fight with whether it's a family member or a friend that has basically changed the course of the friendship or relationship?
Oh,
And
for sure. I feel like I've had a good handful of friends where it's just we've had our falling out and gone completely different directions, and that was the last. And I'm like, that sucks because like, and it sucks. I mean, it sucks in one sense, but I honestly, actually, now that I think about it, it was the best thing that ever happened for me and who I have become. And I don't really hold on to that stuff. Like, if somebody wants to come back in my life, like, I had a friend that I had a huge falling out with, and we recently reconnected and we're like becoming friends again. And we are both completely different people, and our relationship is so different. And I think that's so cool because who we were back then isn't who we are today.
that is really cool. So, have you noticed that with those friendships that have had falling outs or relationships with other people, has there ever been a common denominator, like a common reason of why they haven't worked out or why you got into a fight with them?
That's a good question. For a while when I was younger, I had a really hard time. I would always end up in groups of like me and two other people, and it was three people. And I would always be the person that would like we'd be really close, and then I would be the one that like got kind of like bullied or like treated bad, and they would become best friends. And that happened a lot, and I started to be like, what is it? Like obviously I'm doing something. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. Like I was young. It started in like elementary school, and it happened a few times. And when I was talking about it in therapy, I was like, I feel like this always happens and I'm not sure why. And we were talking and she was like, it might be because it's you and your parents. Like your parents and you, and it's three, and that's what you're used to. And like that might be why you end up in like groups like that. And I feel like I don't remember, like, honestly, like, looking back, I can't even remember, like, that has not been a situation so long. I feel like, one, I wasn't surrounding myself with the right people, which is obviously one major thing, but I've also
Mhm.
just, like, grown so much from that, and I don't really put myself even if I end up in that situation, I don't feel like I'd react the same way as I would have back then, which probably led to some of the things. I mean, I don't have, like, a straight answer, I can't even remember, like, so long ago, but I know
Yeah.
that happened a couple times, and I was like, "Alright, like, I'm obviously a part of this denominator. I'm not gonna blame everybody else. Like, I'm a part of it. If it keeps happening to me, like, I
Have you
had
ever
a
gotten
that's like
into a
so
physical fight?
no.
I mean, it makes sense. That's really interesting about the observation that your therapist said about your parents being 3 and then you, like, finding that
Y
group of
yeah,
3. That's
right?
really
It's so
interesting.
interesting. I also realized, like, it's interesting when you step back and you start to, like, see fights and be like, "Wow, that happened because of this." And I had a roommate in college, and, like, we met, like, very early on, and then we were, like, roommates through college, and we were really close, and all our roommates that we'd have, like, the 3rd person, always did not like her. Like, they would always, like, end up moving out and, like, something would happen, and I finally realized, I was like, it was her. Like, we ended up having a falling out at the very end, and I was like, people kept, like, not getting along with us because she would just loved the drama and, like, all this stuff, and I was like, "How did I not realize that, like, that was like, that was happening?" But in the moment, you don't always realize it. Have you had things with friends that, like, have happened over and over?
Like, same situation, like, where we've had,
Yeah,
like,
like
a where they do something over and over and you don't realize it till they're, like, out of your life?
yeah.
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, college was definitely a scenario where, people come and go and, things happen, but I mean, I've been so closed off to the idea of friends for so long that because of the hurt or the intensity it requires to build a friendship that I kind of don't really remember much of my friendships other than like my core ones from high school. Does that make sense? Like I don't know. I think I'm starting to block them all out because it's just been
I do that. I literally do that.
yeah.
I mean, that is literally what led me to start therapy was, like, figuring out, like, letting people back in, and we've talked about that, but it's so hard when
Yeah.
you've been hurt. 1, you block it out and you're like, "I don't even remember," and 2,
Well,
it's like
that
letting
and
people
it's
back in is so hard. Like, you're like, "I don't wanna
it's
let anyone in,
hard.
like, what are they gonna do to hurt me?"
Yeah, and even like surfacey, like I hate having like when you get to know people, obviously you have to like figure out the dynamics and you have to like figure out if you mesh well. And so like that beginning of a friendship is still hard, even if you do keep it like pretty like not deep, like not every friendship has to be deep, but even that like initial startup of a friendship is so exhausting because you're trying to figure out what they respond well to, what they don't, what their interests are, if you have anything in common, what you don't have in common, if that goes well together. I mean, if you have significant others, if they go well together. I mean, that is such a huge part of my life, like having Bryce blend well with my friends and stuff like that, that it's like exhausting to be able to weed them out and be able to find who is in that circumstance. But then also where you live makes a big impact on friendships and like the people you want to surround yourself with because like where I currently am at, I'm not like that in the I'm not really vibing the area. And I'm like, I think that whenever we're ready to like relocate, I'd be more willing to like maybe reach out, but I just feel like it's just I don't see long term of where we're at right now happening, and so I don't wanna start something that's not gonna last, especially if it's an
But you can
in-person
also
friendship.
have friends that, like, aren't even if it's not you're not there and it's not gonna be forever. Like, look at us, we're a long distance friend,
You're
and
like
I
at
feel
us,
like,
we're so
"Look at
cute.
us. Look
And
at us."
that's
Or,
the
like,
thing,
when I
like,
was
distant friendships, I am, like, so good with long distant friendships for the most part because that's just, like that's what all of mine are, and so it's definitely I think that's where I have to find areas to work on is finding those friends in person, and I don't know, it's just I definitely more willing to look into it nowadays than I used to be, but I mean, circling back to, like, all the issues I've had with friends in the past and, like, the fights and all that, it I need to really get over it, essentially.
I
Like, I
mean,
kinda just
I
feel like it's
feel
time to move forward.
yeah, but it's still hard, and I think, you have to work through that in some sense, whatever that it looks like for you, and I feel like, when you have been hurt, it is scary to let people in, and just letting people in, I mean, baby step into it, like, just, like, going to a coffee, like, no pressure, like, an hour coffee, you can always be like, "Oh, like, I'd love to do coffee, but I have a appointment at 1 and go at 12," like, setting so it's not like you're stuck and, like, you just go and you're like, "Okay, I felt that, next time we could do lunch," or whatever, and I think just, like, slowly letting people in too is, like, I let you in really slow. Like, that's how I am very much like, I will slowly let someone in. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Like, there was some reason that person came into my life for a moment. But if it works out, like, that is so exciting too, because now you have a new friend and something that you get to grow with. Like, if we had never just met for a quick lunch or coffee, whatever it was in Hawaii, we wouldn't have gotten here. And I think that's also something to remember. Like, you don't have to commit to something huge just because you go to one coffee.
Yeah, that's true. There's no obligations for it. I think that what's really interesting to hear is that, like, you gave such a great piece of advice. Like, if you're gonna meet up with someone, having, like, something planned. So if you want, like, a reason to have to leave, so that way there's no, like, "Oh gosh, I don't know how to wrap this up," kind of a thing. Like, there's a reason. Like, that's something I need. Like, if I find myself yeah, I find myself it's funny. We're at, like, the grocery store, and Bryce is, like, the chatter. He will be the person to talk with the checkout person. "Hey, how's it going? Long day? Busy? Like, what are you doing this weekend?" And I'm just like, "How's it going?" Like, "Good." Like, "Did you find everything?" "I did, thank you." Is your day going" like, I'll just keep it very basic, and I have a hard time communicating with people that I'm like, when I don't have to do anything extra, but Bryce, he's always talking with people. He's on it, and so I think I use him as my buffer for when I'm in an environment of meeting new people, and so when I get into an environment and he's not there, it's hard for me to be able to communicate myself, but I do it. I mean, I do it just fine. I mean, like, I was worried when me and you just went to Disneyland, and it was, like, the best day ever.
Yeah,
But
but it's like it's something different. I think that's something I literally like I love to push myself out of my comfort zone. Like that's something I'm always like trying to do. And that was something I did when I was in Florida. I was like I went to a bunch of coffees. Like most of those didn't really turn into big friendships, but it really like set up this new like comfort for me that now when I'm back, I've been able to meet up with people and like be like, "Oh, I really like that person. Like I'll hang out with them again." Where before like doing that really was scary and was really hard because I didn't do that often. And it is like am I gonna go sit with this person? We're gonna have nothing to talk about? Yeah, maybe. I've had that happen before, but at the end of the day, like, whatever. Like, okay,
for
we're not
my
gonna hang
worst
out
nightmare.
again. But setting that like a time, like, oh, I have to go, gives you that opportunity to okay, like I went and it didn't work, and I was able to leave. I wasn't stuck, and like I had to sit there for like 3 hours or whatever.
Oh my gosh, that'd be cringe. That'd be so hard. Um, so in situations, I mean, with friendships, but then we also talk about, like, I feel like for me, it's harder to bring confrontations up with friendships or issues because I just am so terrified of how they'll go. But like with Bryce and I'm not afraid to I don't like to say fight, but like I'm not afraid to have disagreements or arguments with him because I know we'll work through it. Like I know how it's gonna end. We've never gone to bed mad at each other. Like that is a rule. Like we will never go to bed mad at each other, even when we've gotten close. Like we always come back and we work through it. And that's the thing that I love is that it just gives me that safety net of creating that foundation of it's gonna be okay. Like we're that good. Like it's gonna be okay. But how do you create that in a friendship? And I think at that point, it has to be mutual. You have to have that mutual
Yeah.
agreement that it's gonna be okay, and
Yeah.
then if
And
that's not
I
something you have, then I mean, yeah, it's scary.
Oh, for sure. I think you have to get to a point one where you're deep enough in a friendship that you can like say this, but also being like, hey, I've said this to you before, like, hey, this is like usually when I feel like things happen, I'm putting up a wall and this is why. And literally just being overly open about it. And that has been actually hard for me because I have been hurt from being open with people. But it's like if I don't try, I'm never going to find those people that are going to be there for me. So like I at least have to try. And if I get hurt, okay, then like someone else is, like I'll figure it out. I'm going to grow from it. But at the end of the day, like if you don't try and like I've said to you multiple times like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this right now." And like I feel like that's made us stronger and not as fearful to have those confrontations or have those conversations. But before when we hadn't said that, if we never had done that, I'm sure we wouldn't have grown as much as a
Yeah, we
friendship
probably would've
either.
just brushed over it, and then who
Yeah.
knows what if that would've just
Yeah.
festered and exploded later, or if we never would have been able to, like, actually get to that level of being able to talk about those things. And that's the thing is that you really have to find out if the friendship is strong enough to be able to handle those types of confrontations that we've, like, talked about in the beginning. Like, if they're not emotionally mature enough to be able to talk about it, and I mean, the only way to really figure that out too is you gotta do it. And if it doesn't go well, then I mean, I wouldn't say abandon ship, but at least you have an idea. And people change too. Like sometimes just because it didn't go well the first time doesn't mean that it can't in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone you can grow and you can change, but somebody has to be willing to grow and if someone's work I feel like it's
It's
pretty
hard when
obvious
one
if
person
someone's
is though and the other person
oh,
isn't.
for
That's when it
sure.
creates a
That's
really
super hard.
hard times. let us know if it's hard for you to have confrontations or discussions with someone that you're close with, friends, family, and what it is that holds you back from having those. If it's something that you have a hard time with, is it because you're scared of how they'll react? Are you scared of the information you're telling them? Are they not emotionally there to be able to handle the conversation? Or is it just a pure gaslight conversation? Like, what is it that holds you back from really taking the problems that you're wanting to have discussed and having them with that person that you're wanting to have them with?